The Title Block, episode number 7, Allan Stichbury, part 1.
It's gonna snow tonight. I know I will be liking it. So let's go. Let's go. Step out of the house. Step into the wild. Put on that dress tonight. The one your mom don't like. I'll see you at the lights.
Welcome back to The Title Block, a podcast about Canadian theatre designers, their history, and their craft. I'm your host, Michael Cruz, and today I begin my interview with designer Allan Stichbury from Victoria, BC. We start with a chat about his early years in Victoria and Edmonton, and the shows that sparked a 30-year career in Canadian theatre. The audio is frankly low quality, and I apologize for that. It took a lot of effort to clean it up to make it what it is, and I have remedied the situation for my next Skype interview. We'll just have to sit through this one for now. You can find the show notes at thetitleBlock.com/episodes, but here now is my chat with Allan, and I will see you after the interview. Allan Stichbury has designed sets, lights, and costumes for theatres all across Canada. He has also designed in the USA and Thailand. He graduated from the University of Alberta in 1978, and in 1988 he became a professor at the University of Victoria, and since that time has balanced a career as a professional designer and a teacher. Recent theatre productions include the set for Mice and Men, The Wars, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for Theatre Calgary, and set and lighting for Communion at Alberta Theatre Projects. Recent opera productions include set designs for The Rake's Progress and The Flying Dutchman at Pacific Opera Victoria and Barbara of Seville at the Vancouver Opera. Allan has recently established a student exchange between Bangkok University and the University of Victoria. The first students have just returned to Canada, having spent the last 6 months in Thailand working and studying at Bangkok University. Allan, welcome to The Title Block.
Thanks, Michael.
It's great to be speaking with you. I'm really excited to have a conversation about your early career and your approach to design. So let's get right into it. I understand you were a member of Actors Equity before you became a designer. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. I joined Equity in 1974 as a stage manager.
As a stage manager, and you worked how long at that career before you decided to switch?
I gave up my Equity membership in 78, but I'd have to say that I wasn't terribly active as a stage manager other than, say, in the early, probably by about 75, 76. By 76, I was pretty much done.
And how did you make that choice to begin with? Like, what brought you to theater in the first place?
Oh, well, that was all about girls.
Of course.
When I was in high school in Saskatoon, in the last part of grade 12, I started going out with a girl who was very interested in theater. And at the end of grade 12, 1971, it was time to go out hitchhiking across the country. So a buddy of mine and I started hitchhiking across the country and variously ended up in Vancouver during the Gastown riots, and all of us ran away to Victoria shortly after that. And it was in Victoria that I discovered the University of Victoria, and I thought at that point in time that I was going to be a lawyer. I had a scholarship to go to the University of Saskatchewan to study law, so that was pretty much all I had in my mind. But I decided while I was in Victoria that it looked like a whole lot nicer place to live than Saskatoon. So I gave up my scholarship at the University of Saskatchewan and enrolled in pre-law courses at the University of Victoria. But while I was in Victoria, I didn't know anybody at this point in time. So I had a car by then. And I remember one day driving downtown, picking up a hitchhiker who was an actor, and she was going to do a show downtown. So I dropped her off, and she gave me a comp ticket to a show. So that was my very, very first show, was giving a hitchhiker a ride in 1971. And I don't know if I really liked the show or didn't like the show. I can't truly remember, but I do remember later on that year at school becoming quite bored with some of my classes, economics and political science and large sociology and psychology classes. And the only small class that I had was an English class. And in that English class, there were a number of students who were in the theater department. So I started hanging out with them, hanging out at the theater, ended up dropping my economics course and taking good old Theater 100, and just found that I found people and something that I truly enjoyed, although it was a brand new experience for me. So 1971, I went to theater for the very first time. By 1972, I had switched my major and was studying theater.
It's incredible that you started out in Victoria and you've ended up sort of making a career of that.
Yeah,
Now,
it's
remind me again of where you grew up.
I was born in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and went to elementary and high school in Saskatoon.
Oh, I see. Okay. And I can imagine why Victoria would be very appealing, especially in the summer.
Oh,
In the winter.
it was amazing to me. I had no idea that such a thing actually existed in Canada.
Right, of course. And what was you Theater 100, that does it for most of us, I think.
Yeah.
But what was the theater scene? Did you have a sense of what was going on in Victoria as far as the art scene and the theater scene in the early 70s? Or was it, we did just sort of stick to on campus?
No, there was quite a bit, actually. The 70s was a very active time. We were coming out of that 1967 era and Canadian nationalism and the drive to have, or the desire to have, new Canadian plays and have plays and art that talked about and talked to Canadians. So even in Little Victoria, and Victoria was really tiny then, there was the Bastion Theatre, which was the sort of regional company. There were a number of amateur companies, most of which still exist today. And there was this Company One, which was started by a man from the University of Victoria named Carl Hare. And they did sort of touring shows of mostly historical Canadian shows, a bunch of platforms and actors carrying flashlights. And as well as that, the Belfry Theatre also got started in the early 70s in Victoria. So it was actually quite an active community. There were independent press. There were lots of artists around. It was actually a kind of a busy scene, and Vancouver was not very far away.
Right, of course. Well, that's terrific. Now, what was there anything that sort of made you want to switch into design, or did you have a notion of after doing it for a little while, this is exactly where you wanted to land?
Hey, I don't think I knew for a while. I think that I landed in stage management because I had some sort of facility for it, and it seemed in the early 70s there were more jobs than there were people to do them. So if you just sort of stood up and said, "Oh, I'll do that," then you got hired. It's so different today. Oh my God, it's so different for the students today. But at that time, I tried stage management. I also tried some lighting design at school, although I certainly didn't know very much. I got a job in a summer theater company through the university and ended up doing all the lighting, although my entire lighting experience up to that time was a 30-minute class with the technical director who was on his way to Tennessee.
Right.
So, so I landed in school and I started doing some things, but I only lasted in the theater program at UVic for one year and a few months. It was a time of enormous unrest and lots of protesting about everything, particularly anything American. And so it turned out that most of the faculty were all imports from the United States. It was the time of the Vietnam War. So everybody was protesting and asking all these or telling all these professors that they had to go home.
Right.
So a whole bunch of them decided that they'd had enough, and so they did all leave. It was at that time that the department kind of fell apart. Well, it didn't fall apart. It just sort of morphed. And one of the people who left the department at that time was a man named Wolfgang Baba. And Wolfgang went downtown to Bastion Theatre and started working for them as their technical director and carpenter. And he asked me if I would come along. So I worked a little bit in the shop and also worked as an assistant stage manager. And by the next year, they asked me if I would be the lighting designer instead of doing those other jobs, because I turned out to not be that good as a stage manager. At least I didn't think I was, or maybe I was just bored with it, and certainly not as a carpenter. So I started working as a lighting designer. There were some really interesting designs, and some of the people who are still out there working today, people like Ed Coatman, were designing at the Bastion. But honestly, I thought there's something that more that it could be. I felt that it could be better, and I didn't know how to make it better. I had no training. I had my only experience in design was what I had seen really in Victoria and maybe a little bit in Vancouver at that time. So I decided that after having worked at Bastion for a couple of years, that I would go and apply to some schools.
Right. And what was there anybody to help you make that to help you make that choice, or were you kind of stumbling around in the dark? I guess there was enough people out there to sort of help mentor those decisions. Was there not?
Yes, but there was one man who was particularly important, and that was a man named Bill West here in Victoria. Bill, after all the Americans left, had up till then, Bill had been a high school teacher teaching art in Victoria and doing a little bit of theater work. But when all the Americans left, he got hired to become the design instructor at the university. And it was in that 1 year that I did spend at the university that I kind of latched on to Bill as a mentor. And he had a really exciting, to me at the time, habit where you would sit down at a table to have a conversation, and the first thing he'd do would be bring out a pad of paper or a sketchbook and put a pencil on top of the book and put it in the middle of the table, and then say, "Okay, now we can talk." So it was at that point that I decided I needed to learn how to draw.
Right.
I had no background. I had no background in art, no background in theater. I just had found that it was the people that attracted me, the collaboration, the working with other people to create something that I found really enjoyable. And Bill was the one who really encouraged me to look at design as a way in.
Terrific. Now, one of the things that sort of has bothered me when I did my original training, and I trained in the early '90s, so this is much later after many of the schools had sort of been well established, was it wasn't really like fine arts training. You weren't doing life drawing. You were doing technical drawing to learn how to communicate your ideas, but to actually collect those ideas and to sketch them out, you were sort of on your own. Was that available? Were those kind of opportunities available to you at UVic, or did you have to find them outside of the faculty? Or
they certainly were not available at UVic. Though Bill was very much an artist, and there was always the discussion of art and boat building and both craft and full-on art. There was we did lots of work with woodblock prints and etching and silkscreen and all sorts of things. But it was when I went to the U of A that I started to really get training. And U of A may have been a bit unique in that time period. It really was, if it isn't still, a conservatory program within a university.
Right.
And
And what were the origins of that program? It was obviously well established when you were.
yes, it was very, very, very well established by the time I got there, and has become even more so now. It dates back. Boy, I don't even know when the U of A program began, but by the time I got there, in design there were three full-time faculty members, and they only took six students into first year, and by the time you graduated, there was maybe one left. So the teacher-student ratio was incredible.
Mhm.
So we did like drawing, and we did art history, and we did design history, and that program also at that time when I went there went through a bit of a change. And a man named Victor Becker from the United States arrived, and he brought a really exciting, at least I found an exciting energy to the program. The faculty members were young and engaged and pretty fresh out of school, doing really exciting work and really pushing us to do research and to use our imaginations, to look for the poetry in a piece, not just learn how to draft it.
Right. That's tremendous. Now this takes you to what? Where are we in this story? So you had this is now the late 70s,
This is now the late 70s. I graduated in 78.
and that's when you started your career, kind of officially as a designer.
Yeah, I had done a little bit before that, of course, at the Bastion Theatre, but not really very much. But in 78, I graduated, and when I got out of school, I wanted to make some money pretty quick. I was lucky. Again, in the 70s, there was a new theater turning up just about every year. There would be a new one on the block. So it wasn't hard for us to get work. I mean,
Right.
so again, like I said earlier in the conversation, it's so much different today. But in 78, I landed a job as a designer at CBC, fresh out of school. It was the Commonwealth Games, so there was lots of work to do. And by the end of that summer, well, actually in the last year at school, I did some work for a small company in town, which was a lunchtime theater company called Northern Light Theater, which has changed its mandate since then. But it was a lunchtime theater trying to stretch its wings to branch out and start doing evening shows. So it was an amazing opportunity. I also had the chance to, with one of my teachers at the U of A, to design one of those school touring shows for the Citadel on Wheels. And I also managed to get some work at Theater 3 at the same time. So, but I mostly I worked at Northern Light Theater and became their resident designer.
So at this point you've established yourself sort of as a fixture in at least three provinces in the West.
Yeah.
How did you expand? Because your career really, I mean, you started working across Canada quite early. I mean, I think quite early. I mean, these days it takes, 5 or 10 years before somebody
Yeah.
starts to get into the circuit. How did you? First of all, what was the feeling in the West for Central and Eastern Canada, and how did you move across the country?
I think everybody thought that we were pretty backwoodsy. Most of the designers and everybody coming in to do work in Alberta and in BC at that time were from somewhere else, with the exception of, say, Cameron Porteous at the Vancouver Playhouse, but and Phil Silver in Edmonton. But most of the people brought in to do work were coming from the East, and they kind of didn't think we really knew much about what we were doing, that we weren't that sophisticated. But I got really lucky. I was working as I said, at Northern Light Theater, and artistic director at the time, Scott Swan, decided to produce a play called Wings by Arthur Coppett. And Wings, for those of you that don't know the play, is an incredible piece of theater. It's about 90 minutes long, no intermission. It's the story of a woman who has a stroke and tries to put her life back together or understand what her life now is. And at the end of the play, she dies. And it's a play where design can have such a huge impact. The first moment of the play, there's a woman sitting on stage alone in a chair, reading a book, and she has a stroke right in front of us. And the next image we see is she's in the hospital. And then the play goes through with her variously being in two different worlds at the same time, the world of her mind and the reality. It was an extraordinary piece of theater, and I read it and I went, what the heck do we do with this thing? How do we go about making this somehow alive? And two or three different things happened for me. One was I had my father won a free ticket to go to Las Vegas. He didn't want to go, so I took the ticket, of course, and decided to go to Las Vegas for the weekend. And I remember going up and down in the elevator, and the elevator had mirrors on all four sides. And of course, I was multiplied multiple times inside this elevator. That image stuck with me, and it felt like that had something to do with wings. Mm. Then another moment happened when I was waiting for the bus outside the Woodward's department store, downtown Edmonton. And I found myself standing there sort of late at night and looking at the mannequins in the window, and I could see my image in the window as well, not my reflection there. And I could actually reach out, and my image could touch the mannequin in the shop window.
Right.
And I went, that's wings. That's what happens to her. Part of her is one place, and another part is another place. Now, if we add mirrors to it and I become multiples, then that would be really crazy. So I had no idea how that. Okay, so it's a great idea, but what do you do with that idea? And my best friend at the time, a guy named Bob Horlak, was the technical director at the theater company. And I went in and I sat down with him and I said, I got this idea. I have no idea how we can do this, but I want to do this and I want to do that. And I want to see multiple images and I want the reflection to be here. And he said, well, I just read something about a product out of Germany that is like 50-50 glass, so that we could actually imagine somebody's, you can see through it if you like that. And if we put a mirror behind that, then we're getting reflections of reflections. And so I thought, okay. And I put together some kind of quick drawing and a model based on this conversation that we've had, but we'd not seen this material. And so we decided that we would still do a design based on this imaginary material, which eventually Roscoe started marketing as a shrink mirror scrim. Mm-hmm. And nowadays you can buy it as film to put on your car windows.
Sure.
Or your house windows. But at that time it was some kind of new spooky product out of Germany. So I took it to Scott Swan, the director, and said, this is how I think we should do wings. Now, we hadn't had a conversation about the show at this point in time. And he quite sensibly wanted to talk more about things. And I said, yeah, but Scott, this is it. This is the idea. This is what I want to do. And I don't want to do anything else. And he said, but, and I said, so I feel really weird saying this, but if you don't want to do it, it's fine, but you'll have to get somebody else because this is all I've got. Mm-hmm. And bless him, he just said, okay, let's go for it.
That's awesome.
I said, let's go for it. And he embraced it. And the thing about design always is that no matter what you do as a designer, the director has to embrace it. They have to make it theirs. They have to get to the point where there's nobody knows where the idea came from. Nobody cares. It's just ours.
Right.
And anytime a designer or a director says my, I think we're all in trouble.
Right.
It's ours, and nobody knows where it comes from anymore.
Right.
But he just took it and he ran with it. He managed to get Ann Casson to star in the show, playing the lead character. Brilliant company. Sound was extraordinary for the piece. Bob Horlak built this amazing set with these shrink mirror panels that moved and rotated around. And the show was an astronomical hit in Edmonton in sort of like 1980. Such a huge hit. And then with Ann Casson as a big calling card, Scott sent it out. And I guess it would be different today, but at that time, he tried to market it to tour across the country into the larger theaters, into some of the larger theaters in the country, and see who would program it in their season. Today, it might get turned into a co-pro or a quad pro or some other kind of thing. But so it went on tour the next year with Ann Casson, and the same sound design, the same lighting design, the same set design, everything. And we ended up playing in Ottawa at the National Arts Centre, having come out of this tiny, tiny little basement theater in Edmonton. All of a sudden, we're at the theater at the NAC.
How was it received there? I mean, this is the first time you sort of came out of the West, yourself? Was there a lot of transfer of ideas between especially the National Theatre and or the NAC and the West, or was this an unusual event?
It was a totally unusual event. I think that one was a combination of whatever Scott did, but it may have had a lot to do with Ann Casson being in the lead role. That they thought it was also a relatively hot new Broadway item, by a well-known playwright at the time, Arthur Coppett. Mm-hmm. So, we landed with this tiny little show at the NAC, and people were just completely blown away. We were coming out of about an 80-seat theater in Edmonton and managing to sell out the National Arts Centre Theater. We weren't in the studio, we were in the theater.
Yes, wow.
And we played there for a couple of weeks and picked up and moved to Montreal, played at Centaur, again in the theater, not the studio, won all sorts of awards. The write-ups in the Montreal newspapers were astounding, and people were starting to really take note of something. We then finished our run there. We went to Calgary, played in Calgary, and then again we then landed in Victoria and played at the Bastion Theatre here. And even to this day, if I meet someone who was around then and I mention Wings, people still remember it. They still remember it. It became a major calling card for me. So I graduated in '78. By 1981-82, I was well known all over the country because of one show.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
that's great. And now,
but it was a combination of Scott embracing the show, the design, and the extraordinary support that I got from the technical director Bob Horlak and people like Guy Roberts, who did the sound design, and it just went on and on like that. It's an amazing team.
It's a great example of it sounds like of technology solving a problem as well, which is kind of a theme in theater, especially where you've got a new product or a new an old thing reimagined. and something that afterwards. I mean, I remember in the late '80s, especially I think it was Phantom of the Opera used the Roscoe Scrim product to great effect with that mirror, and it was a magical effect that no one had seen before. So that's interesting as well. Did you see? I mean, outside of like the traditional fine arts, it seems like new developments, paint, and new techniques tend to drive kind of innovation
They
in theater
do.
somewhat.
They definitely do. And certainly in those late 70s, early 80s, we were all heavily influenced by Joseph Svoboda and all of his experiments with technologies. And
Now you ended up going. Speaking of Svoboda, you ended up at the Banff Center in the '80s as well. Is that right?
I got to share the room with Svoboda.
Were you teaching? Were you doing workshops there, or were you doing master classes, or what was your role out there?
I was designing shows in the theater, and Svoboda was there doing some master classes.
Right. Kevin Lamont told us about this in episode number 2 of the title block.
He
We were
was an
talking
intern
about.
then, yeah.
Yeah, he came back for the summer and he was like in the lunch line.
Right.
That was the sort of extent of his kind of contact. And I was a bit. I mean, it was still interesting. I mean, the man is a giant in theater, let alone theater design. But did you interact with him? Did you ended up? I mean, you ended up taking taking master classes with him, or what was it?
No,
What was your interaction like?
he was in the room. He was just a presence there. I'd certainly been introduced to Svoboda when I was an undergraduate at the U of A. One of my teachers, Terry Gunverdal, had been to the Prague Quadrennial and had looked at some of Svoboda's work. And so he was a part of our conversation while I was a student. I also got to meet people like John Burry when I was a student at the University of Alberta, and he was a contemporary of Svoboda's and kind of a pal. So just meeting Svoboda and talking to him, and I remember what was I doing? The importance of being earnest. And, we wanted to set the opening scene outdoors and have twinkly lights coming through the trees and creating some effect. And I remember talking to Svoboda about it, and he said, you know what? They only remember the first 2 minutes. After that, whatever you put in their mind, it stays. So, from that, we did the lighting effect where in the opening 2 minutes of the show, there was moving effect of dappled light coming through the trees. And as the lights came up and got brighter and brighter for the actual acting of the comedy, that moving light faded out. But you know what? Of course, he was absolutely right. That stayed in the audience's mind. And as far as they were concerned, there was a little bit of breeze and some dappled light coming through the trees.
That's delightful. Now, tell me about your connection to Mike Legan and in your sort of expansion into Central and Eastern Canada. We were working, I think, YPT earlier, Young People's Theatre in Toronto Free Theatre, the Grand,
Yep.
pretty early as well. Like that's you were made.
Yeah,
I mean, you were doing that circuit.
I graduated in '78. By '81, I was head of design at the Citadel Theatre. It was completely insane. I'm doing 7 shows a year at the Citadel. By '82, I went and did a show in Calgary called Farther West with Robin Phillips directing. And I was asked to do the lighting design for that show. And so there's Daphne Dare is the set and costume design. Robin Phillips is directing. The cast is the who's who of Canadian theater. And I'm going, holy crap. But at the end of that show, I decided maybe it was time for me to leave Edmonton. I'd been there for quite a while now, really only 3 years since graduating, but I'd been there for a while. And I thought it was time to hit Toronto. I'd met Michael Egan. He'd done a couple of shows at the Citadel while I was head of design. Had great conversations with him and found him to be, really such a warm, open, funny guy. And he always said, you can come to Toronto. I'll take care of you. I'll introduce you to people. So the combination of having met Robin and working with Robin and Michael encouraging me, I picked up and went to Toronto, and again, I must have horseshoes up my butt or something. But the first show I land in Toronto is at Tarragon. It's a place that still to this day designers all need to work at Tarragon at some point in time. Mm-hmm. But I was at Tarragon, and then I got to work with Robin at Young People's Theatre, and because he was directing a show, and then back to Tarragon and some small shows, and Theatre in the Dell, doing some of those things, and then before I know it, I'm at what was Can Stage, which was at that time Center Stage, designing Cat in a Hot Tin Roof with Kurt Reese directing, and it just went on and on like that. It was completely crazy. I don't know why. I don't think I was that good. I think I was just in the right place at the right time and willing to work hard, but always open to what was going on around me and trying to use what I saw around me. So, at 83, I go to the Grand, and I'm working in Robin Phillips' rep company designing shows. Everything just seemed to constantly want to click for me.
Mm-hmm. But at some point, in fact, in 1988, you end up back at University of Victoria.
Yeah, that was one of those strange things. By 84, I was doing stuff at the Banff Center. 80, the Robin Phillips year came to a crashing end pretty quickly. So everybody kind of tried to regroup, and I managed to find work at Banff. I had been doing some work at MTC in Winnipeg, and that was going well. I also started doing some stuff at the Blythe Festival and working in Calgary, and all of this started to pull me away from Ontario. And it was 1980, what was it, 80, 88, 80, whenever it was that Calgary had the Olympics. That must have been 88.
I think it was 88. Yeah, I think you're right.
So I was doing fine. I was doing stuff. I had a show at the Royal Alex. I had a show at the Shaw Festival. I had shows at MTC. Back at the Grand now under new management. I had some work, but it was this connection to Banff that I was finding most interesting. And so this combination of the connection to Banff and the end of the work at the Grand, desire to just try something new. Again, at that time, none of us wanted to stay anywhere more than a year or two. We wanted to just keep moving. Artistic directors typically lasted 3 years, maybe 5 max at that time. So everybody was very, very mobile. And in 88, feeling like it was time to move, Calgary seemed like the place to go. There was the Olympics, so a guarantee of lots of work.
Right.
And close to Banff, where I seemed to be doing a lot of work. And I picked up a Globe and Mail, and in that Globe and Mail was an ad for a position as designer at University of Victoria, teaching. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I like teaching. I think I'm enjoying this. I feel like I can handle this. So I applied for the job, and off I went to Victoria to interview. And ironically, a guy that I have ended up working with a lot after that. I got the article in the Globe and Mail when I was in Banff, but then I went to MTC and I was doing a show there, and the assistant director on the show at MTC was Dennis Garnham. Mm-hmm. Dennis was an undergraduate student at the University of Victoria, and I started talking to him about the possibility of going to Victoria to teach, and he encouraged me. So I went out, I interviewed, I got the job. So when I got to Victoria, one of the students in the first class that I was teaching, first design class I was teaching, was Dennis Garnham, who I've since gone on to work with a lot.
Yeah. Now, just before we go on, I just wanted to make sure that I don't miss the opportunity to ask you about the Robin Phillips year.
Oh, yeah.
At the Grand. Now, this was before I sort of, was aware of anything. Mm-hmm. I didn't start until the early 90s. So what exactly happened? He was there for a year, is that right?
Yeah, we started in the spring and over the summer, the spring and summer, there were massive renovations to the building, trying to get it ready to be a repertory house. I was hired as one of the two lighting designers, the other one being Michael Whitfield. Thank God Michael Whitfield was there, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But anyway, between Michael and I, we created the rep plot for the main stage, and I did most of the shows in the basement and about half of the shows upstairs in the main house, because Michael was still at Stratford at the time, so he could only do a certain number of shows. But we started in the summer and did Waiting for the Parade, which was also filmed. And there was a partnership deal with a company in Toronto, I think it was called Prime Media or something. And most of our shows were supposed to be filmed at that time. And that was part of the funding for the company. Mm-hmm. By Christmas time, however, the end of seasons subscriptions combined with massive expenditures on producing these shows and maintaining an entire repertory company, and the lack of fundraising and the fact that all this TV stuff wasn't really selling, I think, pretty much bankrupted the company. So by Christmas, the dream was over, and we kind of hobbled our way through the rest of the season. But by March, we were done. Mm-hmm. And the company was significantly in debt and had to basically restart itself.
Wow. Yeah, that's big. It seems really ambitious. Did the films get released?
I think the one of Waiting for the Parade did get released, mm-hmm. But that may be the only one that did. Oh no, they also did a production of The Wars.
Oh, right.
That was also shot at the same time with the same repertory company. But it wasn't the play being filmed, it was actually a film.
I'll see you at last.
That was part one of my interview with Allan Stichbury, speaking to me via a terrible Skype call from Victoria, British Columbia. Next time we finish up our talk with Allan's later career and his recent work in South Asia. The music for this podcast is PodSafe music from the band 1990s called See You at the Lights. You can find them at roughtraderecords.com/the 1990s. Please go to iTunes and give us a review. It will help get the word out about this podcast and share the history of theatre design in Canada. And you can follow us on Twitter at TheTitleBlockCA and on Facebook.com/The Titleblock Podcast. You can send comments and requests by email to thetitleBlock@gmail.com. Feel free to share this with your friends, colleagues, students, or teachers and listen to it while you send someone to get the screw gun after wedging the upstage wall for the set of Noises Off in the loading dock door. I'm Michael Cruz, and I'll see you next time on the Title Block.